Welcome once again to this African Christianity epic journey, a review of the interactions between the Africans and Europeans in the Christian circles. And so, the context of this period in time, the 5th century, is that the political climate of the world was beginning to change. The Roman domination was being put to question, and we will see why. Now, once they established the five patriarchies, and the Greeks were indeed sent to Alexandria and Jerusalem. Like I said, after installing a Coptic bishop to rival Bishop Timothy of the Coptic, the two Coptics, Bishop John was dropped, and there was silent. There was no Greek Alexandrian bishop. And in this unfortunate circumstance, the Greeks were able to look for a tribe called the Melkites, who were part of the Coptics and part of the northern ethnic groups. They identified them and they started speaking to them, and they came to a conclusion of raising not another Coptic bishop, but a Melkite. And so, having a Melkite bishop in Alexandria, who represents Africans, Alexandria was all to take for the Europeans, because the Melkites were the minorities and the Coptics were being pushed to the periphery. And now they have their own bishop as well. But now the Melkite bishop is elevated to the status of archbishop, because this was the new name of the office. And between 527 and 565, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire is called Justinian I, who is hailed for building Hagia Sophia, Saint Sophia Church in Constantinople, came to Alexandria, and through his political interference banished all the Coptics from Alexandria. The remaining remnants of the Coptic Christianity and the defenders of African Christianity are now banished politically, and they are pushed to the Nile Delta, which is a good thing. But again, you can see the colonization that is so much connected to Christianity, especially European Christianity, continues. It may not be a European thing to combine colonization to Christianity to achieve their goals. But it is part of the human nature limitation. And so from this time, the Copts decided to write their own calendar. They departed and vacated from the Julian calendar because of the oppressors. And so they wrote their calendar, which began from around 280 AD during the persecution by Diocletian. Remember, the African Orthodox Church of Kenya men and women who fought for the independence and the freedom of worship and religious expression against the colonial government and the colonial European missionary churches. They said that there was no white man and a white priest. They were all one and the same. And so it is in this backdrop that we are looking at this historical review, and you can see that the white priest suppressed the Copts for almost 600 years without having any meaningful or impactful success. But now here comes a white colonizer who does it effectively. It is the same trend that was used in sub-Saharan Africa. You first send the missionaries to appeal to the hearts, and then you bring the colonial administrators to reshape the mind. And so it happens that now the Copts have been banished from Alexandria. It is now official, and the collaborating Copts remain in Alexandria. And it is what it is. But later, Justinian, who was martyred anyway, became a Christian saint in European Christianity. Africans will not have any good memory of Justinian I, especially the Copts. And this is the biasness of the world that is there. The regionalism that is killing a lot of Christian gains even today. He tried to assist even after banishing them. He tried to build several cathedrals, one in Upper Delta, another one in Puntland, another one around West Africa. But unfortunately, during this time, like I said before, the European dominance was put into question by the Arabs. And so through their new religion of Islam, they began conquering all the European territories. And they took Jerusalem. And 5 years later, they came and conquered Alexandria. And within a year and a half to 2 years, they had conquered the whole of Egypt. Now, all the efforts of Justine were thwarted by these invasions. Um, it may have been timely because in 610, the emperor who followed other emperors who succeeded Justin had accepted monotheism. I'm sorry, monothelitism. You know, when the Copts were told that you are monophysites, you think of God in one. It was a right comment, but it was not correct according to them. They were not ready to accept that. They needed a dual idea of Jesus, who is full man and full divine. And indeed, nobody denies that. But in this fullness of these two natures, what people saw and what is recorded is a man, one single man. And these two natures can only appeal to anybody through reading the biblical texts. It was not visible in time and space. It is only visible from what you know and what lays the foundation of your understanding of things, like, for example, your worldview and culture. And so this was coined by European theologians, and they accepted a concept called monothelitism. And of course, this was part of what the Greeks in Alexandria were supposed to do, to correct, but probably it wasn't the time. The fullness of time had not come for this to happen. So it happened in 610. And this went on, and the Copts were almost accepted. Now there are challenges of Arab invasions. They were accepted, and these went on to until around 6401 AD. The relationship between now the Copts and the Europeans became distorted by the Arab invasion. And so there was a synod that was convened in Alexandria by Europeans in 638, probably a counter of what Heraclius in 610 had admitted. And this is called the First Synod of Alexandria, which is the first European Synod of Alexandria. But things were becoming thick with the Melkites, and so they had to hold one synod there. But remember, between 652 and 737, the Melkites were in conflict with the Greeks again. And so I think their bishop was excommunicated and defrocked. And the history is really gray around that area. And the position of the Archbishop or the Patriarch of Alexandria fell vacant for all this while. And it is only later, at around 737, 738 AD, that an archbishop was consecrated not in Africa, but in a place called Tyre. I think it's some place in Palestine or in Arabia. And so this was also in preparation for an eminent council that was supposed to now tackle the raising issues. And so in 681, the Seventh Ecumenical Council is held in Constantinople again. At this time, the Copts had evangelized the whole of Maghreb, because Maghreb fell to Islam earlier than Alexandria. And the Copts started catechizing there, though because they were denied in Alexandria by the Arabs to baptize and to evangelize. And so the Coptic church remained static. And so they moved outside. So contrary to very many missionary views that the African church was not a mission church, this is an example that the African church was a mission church. And the African church moved from North Africa, and it moved to the west of Africa through Chad, and it went to Mali. It reached almost to the great civilization of Africa, which is the Songhai Empire. And so on the Eastern Front, they moved downwards, and this we shall look very well at this historical movement in my book Karinga, where it explains even the people who were converted, the people who were responsible for the mission work, and so on and so forth. It moves towards the Sudan, and though it had jumped Sudan and gone to Ethiopia as early as the 4th century, the Ethiopian terrain was again another difficult terrain, because it was full of strong African religious believers, and it was a region endowed with very many kingdoms, and so it had to take a centralized political strong kingdom to fall the other kingdoms, so that there can be a one unified kingdom. And so that is a history that you can find in my book again, Karinga. And so this idea of monothelitism was revisited very many times, and after the Arab invasion, the church was cut off from the European interactions. And so the Africans developed their own away from what Heraclius defined their description of the true nature of Jesus. They came up with what they called miaphysitism. And I want you to understand that both of these three terminology, monophysitism, monothelitism, and miaphysitism, they all begin with one. And for me, this is one of the greatest revelations. Whatever you're saying, it is one. So the duality that you guys are using to define or describe the two natures of Jesus, they do not appear, because what will you call the two natures of? It is dualism. It goes back to your traditional worldview. And so everybody remains with their own worldview. So as I conclude, I want us to remember that these efforts by Heraclius of trying to bring back the Copts to the universal church was supported, and the concept of monothelitism was supported by the Armenians and the Syrians. And so, to some extent, also the Antiochians. And so this became another great, powerful inner circle. They were later called Non-Chalcedon in the 90s during the Pan-Orthodox conferences. And the Alexandrian Greek church became subdued by the Muslims. And so when we talk about the Greek Alexandrian church, we're talking about the Melkites and the Greeks. And so this bishop who was installed in Tyre never served in Alexandria, but he represented the Church of Alexandria in European meetings. But they brought again a real Melkite bishop, now with the title of an archbishop, in the 9th century. And so this is already after the relationship between the European Christianity had begun to sail on mud. And the divisions and the cracks between the East and the West became more elaborate. And especially in the 8th Ecumenical Council, which is really not ecumenical because it was boycotted by Christians from Rome and other spheres of influence of the Roman Church. And so it discussed the icons, and they were rejected by the Western Christianity. And so it became a very big war, almost going for a full century. And the change of regimes in the empire depended on the decisions of the council, like it were from the time of Constantine. And so the church became a desolate place, a place where the society will not find peace and solace and even hope. And so the hopelessness of the European Christianity begins at this point, until when they broke permanently in 1054, and subsequently it became a war path other than a path of salvation. But either way, along all these historical melees, there were people who received Jesus, there were people who witnessed Jesus, and the kingdom mission continued until today. So we'll reach at that, and I'll see you next time. Like I said, today I wish all my fellow Eastern European Christians the best of blessings during the Palm Sunday, and wish all the Western European rite, tradition, Christianity, brothers and sisters, a very blessed Easter Sunday. So remember your identity, remember who you are, remember to represent, and remember to work for the unity of the universe and this faith of this universe. Thank you, and much blessing.